Now I come to the second and most important part in the teaching or for the teaching of English literature, which I consider as learner-centered approach, because in this phase, the learner, under the guidance of his teacher, is going to invest in the notions, literary notions, which have been acquired earlier about what do you mean by elements of fiction, what do you mean by literary movement, what do you mean by literary theory. All this is going to now used in this application phase, in this attraction. How? First, I consider out of my experience that in order to break this, there is a familiar, there is psychological, barrier toward the literary text, which I have found in my learners, okay? Because they always they tell me they do not know how to start. So I think that the best way to start and to break this barrier is to start with the formalist approach. Why? Because in the formalist approach, the learner is not required to go outside of the text. On the contrary, the focus is only on the elements, the interpretation of the elements of the text, like the point of view, the character, the time, tone, etc., theme, and how they all work together and relate to each other to produce the theme of the writer. Uh, it is a very practical method as a starting point in doing literary analysis. Okay, so I consider that the formalist approach is basic in any type of literary analysis, especially for beginners. The formalist approach scrutinizes the elements of fiction and how they all relate together to produce the meanings of the writer. It discards outside information. It means that the learner will not make efforts to go outside of the text and look for extra information. So the learner does not look for social, historical, or any type of information that relates to the text. So here the student works with language and focuses on the elements of fiction. They become familiar with the workings. Like this, they become familiar with the workings of literature. Another point to consider in teaching of literature is the setting of the socio-historical and cultural background. Of course, if the teacher is not following, of course, the formalist approach, and if he needs this information for class discussion later on, so he can assign the students to look for historical or cultural, political, or any features of the period of the work, and then come into the class to use them for discussion later. So, a literary work, because a literary work is a reflection of its time, and each period of time has its social, cultural, intellectual, political, historical, or literary features. In this regard, to make connections between the inside and the outside of the text, the teacher at this stage assigns the learners to situate the text in its adequate outside context before they come to class. Uh, Designing reading activities. Of course, these points about learner-centered approach are not organized, so the teacher is flexible with which he can start. But for me, I always start with literature class with the formalist approach. The remaining points, it depends on the class and on the requirements of the course. So now about this point, designing reading activities. When I design reading activities in literary text, here I design it when I see a weakness in my students, when my students are unable to analyze the elements of fiction independently. They cannot they do not know how to invest in the knowledge they have and how they can use it in analyzing of literature. Here, the writer, Here, the teacher can interfere, can help them with designing, setting activities, okay? Setting reading activities in the class of literature is an open option to the teacher. I see that when the students are unable to explore the text independently, the teacher can design some reading activities which function as a guide, which points to features that should be considered. So here, of course, in reading activities, we can choose between extensive or intensive reading activities. This depends on the objectives which the teacher endeavors to achieve. That is, if the aim is to check general comprehension, then the extensive reading is enough. But if the aim is to read the text deeply and look for specific detailed information, then intensive reading activities are made. Okay, so I give an illustration in the following table. If we consider the analysis of character, here, as on the left side, extensive reading activities means looking for general information only. I can ask the students to summarize the story, or I ask them who is the main character or the secondary character. But if I would like to interpret and need more details, then here I go to the type of intensive reading activities on the right. 1. How does the writer present or characterize the main character? 2. What are the character's motivations for taking such actions? 3. How do his decisions affect the course of events in the story? 4. Does the character face any conflict? What is it? 6. Does the character change in the end? At which level? And finally, is the character connected to the theme of the story? In answering these questions, especially intensive reading activity, the reader or the learner is doing interpretation. Here, there is another table here which refers to place. If I ask my students to interpret the place in this story, then if I see a weakness, they do not know how to tackle this issue, I can also design reading activities. So in extensive reading activities, I can ask them where did the story take place? How many places are mentioned in the story? This is too general. But now, if we go to details, how does the writer describe the place? 2. Does the place have impact on the behavior of the main characters? 3. Does the place reveal something about the character? And finally, is the place connected to the general meaning of the story? Okay, so you see in each element, as a teacher, I can design reading activities that are very helpful and guiding for the students to start in their process of literary analysis. Also, there is an important element in in teaching literature, in teaching literary analysis is setting discussion. It is a very important component in literary class. The teacher must provide 15 minutes, 20 minutes for class discussion. Either they discuss the elements of fiction like the character, literary devices to enable the students express their ideas, their opinions. This is one. And 2, he can assign to the students some tasks to prepare before they come to the class. Okay? Such assignments like, for example, this is just an example and suggestions, ask the students to compare between their culture and the cultural issues raised in the text, relate what they have read to their personal life, allow them to bring their own questions into class. If they are at the place of the protagonist, how would they react? Ask them to sort a passage from the text and explain why they chose it and why they see it significant. So, in general, discussion topics should be thought provoking. They are also helpful in developing these literary skills like as critical thinking, and they help also in their personal growth. Now I come to theory. I have a theory. So we know we have got a range of literary theories. Now, when I see that my students now are able to work with the elements of the text independently through the formalist approach, then I can, in another stage, for example, with another literary work, I can now apply a literary based approach. That is, now I can go outside the text, and uh, that would be easier for the student to deal with. So, literary theory and literary criticism are two sides of the same coin. Literary theory helps readers gain deeper understanding and insight. Reading literature through the lens of a theory enables the appreciation of literature and provides new perspectives to better understand the work. Such literary theories like, of course, cultural studies, practical criticism, formalism, reader response, new criticism, psychoanalytic criticism, Marxist theory, postmodernism, post-structuralism, deconstruction, feminist criticism, critical race theory, queer theory, etc., among many. So the introduction of a theory into literature class comes when the students master the language-based approaches first, as I said, like the formalist approach. Then the appreciation of literature strengthens when the literary theory widens the perspectives of reading literature and opens options and perspectives to its reading. Now, the production phase. Now, we should not think about the production phase as being the final step in the teaching of literature. On the contrary, we can invest or employ this production phase throughout all the course of literature analysis. How? It means that when we, for example, in the formalist approach, when I apply at the beginning the formalist approach, in the analysis, for example, of character and the discussion and everything information about characters, me as a teacher, I can ask my students to put all this information and all this analysis we have dealt with in a paragraph, in a production, in a written production. Elements of fiction, point of view, time, write about theme, etc. So teacher can encourage students to use structure here. He can encourage students to use structures from the literary text they see useful for their productions. I have dealt with this point earlier. So at every level in the literary analysis, the teacher recommends a writing task where students practice writing analytically, supporting their productions with quotations or paraphrase from the literary text. It is important when they write now here because they are going to write analytically, so they need to justify their analysis with quotations and paraphrases from the literary text. So students could be said to write about the literary devices, as I said, the elements of fiction, point of view, character setting, or we can ask the students to write an ending to the story here to activate their creativity and their imagination, for example. Or if they were at the place of the protagonist, how would they act? Also, the teacher can suggest a topic which bears controversial issues, which incites students to reflect on the text and life issues at the same time. So, and the production phase is very important in teaching literature. because in the production phase, the student is going to employ all the ideas, the structures, syntactic structures. He's going to use the interpretations, his views, his personal views, everything in his writing. And this here this is why I consider the production phase is very important in teaching literature. So that's all for now about the basics in teaching literature. See you in another video, and thank you for your attention. Bye.